Chris Chandler, and I am one of the IT pre-sales consultants at Nexus, working with customers like yourself, our account management team and our engineering team to really work on solutions for customers. So as I said, to provide an overview of our offerings, as it says on screen, we are working our way down. Nexus have been an established services organisation since 1998, so we've been around for the past 16 years, and there's no sign of us going anywhere, because really the company is going from strength to strength. To work my way down the list, with IT solutions, it truly includes the likes of networking, virtualization, cloud computing, through to business continuity and structured cabling. Nexus as a company have provided solutions to our customer base of well over 1,000 organizations. That's scaling from 5 users down the road to 5,000 user multinational organizations. That the same applies with our IT services section. We can provide consultancy and analysis across our myriad of offerings, as you see on the screen, which include infrastructure audits and health check system migrations, through to IT strategy governance and software asset management. So those of you on the call who are responsible for licensing, please feel free to give me a call and chat through, because I am fully aware of what a headache that can be for people. Moving on again, IT support maintenance. Nexus as an organisation offer tailored support and maintenance contracts to meet specific customer needs. That ranges from 24-hour managed support contracts to ad hoc days for specific projects. So we truly can be flexible in the way that we work with you moving forward. Reason why you're on the call today, enterprise social, as Microsoft likes to call it, but for SharePoint with intranets, extranets, and really communication internally and externally with organizations. By using SharePoint, the obvious market leader in collaboration and management software, Nexus are able to offer systems to truly enhance and optimize the way in which your business runs. Where are we? So moving on to website development. Obviously, with those of you that may well be aware, SharePoint can be used for your website. If you've got Office 365, you've got a ready hosted platform there to be able to deliver your site. But as well as that, we do have our own CMS system. Should you require some e-commerce or additional functionality beyond what is just a standard website, we can offer truly engaging and really good looking websites. Should this be something you're interested in? So unified communications. Obviously, you're looking at SharePoint. Nexus do strongly recommend Microsoft Link, which really does build upon SharePoint and seamlessly integrates with that to provide an end-to-end collaboration solution. But Link itself is really the new industry standard in unified communications, and our investment and expertise in Link has made Nexus one of the leading deployment partners for that product. Strongly urge you to get in contact with us if this is something that you are also considering. Moving on to training exams, obviously with things like SharePoint, Link, and there's going to be both a training requirement from an admin point of view, but also there is end user adoption that needs to be included as part of that. Nexus can provide both sets of training, not just from the Microsoft stack, but we do VMware, the likes of Cisco, and also industry qualifications such as Prince 2 and I2. Again, if you do have any training requirements, please feel free to get in contact with us. So how we back up all of our principal activities, really. This is Nexus at a glance. We are based in two offices in Pines Hill in Exeter, even though we are in Exeter, we do have a geographic reach. So there's nothing to stop us. And I know from personal experience, we've had people, our engineering resource deployed in Scotland and as far afield as Singapore. So we are not stunted with regards to our reach. We have our high-tech IT training exam centre at our offices, so that is comprising of 6 dedicated training rooms, but we also do have two mobile rigs should you require any training on site. It specifies technology, pilot and testing and demo suite. Obviously, we can talk about the products on offer, but we have the ability to show really what it is that we can provide, and also just for you guys to get your hands on it, have a play with it for yourself. For adoption purposes, we tend to find that this is a really good offering for customers. So to tie in with our website development side of the business, we have a photography and multimedia studio located in Exeter. This is really just to enhance what we do, because we've found that with websites there is a requirement for them to look pretty, and also delivery of your message through corporate video is something that is becoming more and more of interest to people. So it says there's 70 plus personnel. In actual fact, Nexus has been on a bit of a recruitment drive, as it were, due to healthy business. And we're now pushing well into 80 personnel as of today, with looking to recruit more and more staff as it goes. So again, building on our offering. As you can see there, Nexus is a very, very strong partner with Microsoft, with 6 gold and 12 silver competencies, placing us, as it says on the screen, in the top 1% of partners worldwide. So you may find that typical Microsoft partners maybe have 1 gold and a couple of silver. We truly have invested in our relationship with Microsoft to provide support, not only with SharePoint and Link, but across the entire solution stack that Microsoft has to offer. I mentioned licensing before. Again, this is something that we are able to assist with should you have any particular discussions around it, and that also includes software asset management as well. Again, please feel free to get in contact if you would like to discuss further. So outside of Microsoft, Nexus are a Dell Premier partner, a VMware Enterprise Solutions partner, and HP IBM Business Partner. I won't really go into too much detail into that, but it's just to provide an idea of beyond our Microsoft services, who we work with, and really what you can come to us and discuss from a vendor point of view. So I mentioned Link before. Just building on that, Nexus have an online store which is linkstore.co.uk. This was set up by us to really showcase the infrastructure around Link, from end user devices straight through to boardroom conferencing solutions. You'll see on there that it is only optimized and certified products for Link, so we can guarantee that the products that are shown on there will indeed work with that. Just to add to that, if indeed you are looking at Link, we do have trial devices available. So again, please feel free to speak to me if you'd like to take any on for a trial. So really just moving on, and just for me to wrap up my part so we can get into the more interesting part of today. We do host a quarterly schedule of technology events, one of which you're obviously on today. We'll be moving, the new quarter will be starting in January, which will be shown on our website. But what I'd like to ask really, if anybody on the call, if there are any specific events or topics that you'd like us to cover and maybe put events on, please do let me know. because we are, as much as we can, and guess, I suppose, what you want to hear about, and make suggestions ourselves. It is good to get that feedback, and maybe we can tailor something specific should you wish to do so. So really, just some follow-ups. Obviously, I'm going to move into Louise's portion of this, and as I said, probably the more interesting part, as opposed to me blabbering on about who Nexus are and what we do. But there's a couple of actions there. Should you wish to do so, we can obviously provide one-to-one demos. Should you wish to do so, and it's just a case of getting in contact with us and speaking to myself or one of our consultants. Should you wish to progress in any way forward. So thank you for your time. I would now like to hand over to Louise to present what you are really here for today. But should you have any questions throughout, please feel free to use the comment section to do so. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Louise. I'm a SharePoint consultant here at Nexus and also trainer. I'm going to be talking through your forms and workflows today. And as Chris said, if there's any questions as we go through, feel free to put them up on the IM section of the window. Okay. So why do we need forms and workflows? What we're going to look at today is a manual process in a business of, I'm sure you've all got paper forms that are passed around your businesses for expenses or travel or credit cards. And we're going to look at how we can automate that process with forms and workflows using SharePoint and InfoPath. So if we take a paper-based scenario, typically, I'm sure we've all got filing cabinets in our offices. These contain lots of pieces of paper, occupy an actual area of the room. Lots of people fill in lots of pieces of paper and stack them in this filing cabinet, many of them never to be seen again or maybe go missing. So we've got lots of manual processes where people put paper in cupboards. It can be a costly and inefficient chore to get these pieces of paper and files back out, but archiving all destruction. Okay. Downsides to having actual filing cabinets full of paper. Most paper forms come with a manual process, which involves either filling out a paper form, which can get lost in between departments. It's hard to track. Once you've given it over to somebody else, you don't actually know where it's going to go. There's no visible audit trail either, so once you've handed it over to a department, that you rely on them doing the right thing with it. But you don't really have any visibility of where it's going, and it can be prone to human mistakes or error, so someone might just drop it and forget about it, and then that form or process doesn't get fulfilled. This can also be costly for times and resources, people moving pieces of paper around the office, actual people approving process and things like that. So we're going to look at how we can automate that and make it a bit easier. The solution we're going to be using today is going to be provided or hosted by SharePoint 2013. I will mention the different versions as we go through. So then why would we want to convert to an electronic form and workflow? So easy access, we can store our forms in a library on SharePoint, which you can control the permissions to, so people can have access to that folder if you allow them to. Things can be searched for, so if you've got an intranet, people can come in and search for the form, search for the policy that goes alongside it, so everything's in one place and you have one version of that form, so you don't have people storing forms on their desktops. You can have one point of contact where they can go to. SharePoint provides a facility to attach metadata to the form, which is company-specific data that you can associate with that entry, and that can also be searchable as well, making it easier to find. Cost savings, we can hopefully get rid of some of those filing cabinets and free up some room in your offices. Actual man hours filing away these documents and retrieving them from archive can all be reduced with an electronic solution. Security, you can enforce who can access those things on the intranet or wherever you choose to host them within SharePoint, so it can all be controlled centrally, which should be a bit more secure than people just wandering along and going into the filing cabinet. Okay, so forms and workflow will provide some automation around the tasks and documentation. The documents will never actually physically move in a physical state. They'll be electronic and they can move around the system, but you can always find where they are. It's fully auditable, so you can create an audit trail to show where the document's been, who it's currently with, and where it's going to be going to. All of this assures that the document will be attended to as required and not lost or discarded in error. So hopefully combating some of the drawbacks of the manual process. So today's example is a real life one that we have at Nexus here. We have our expenses form that we fill in. Currently, or it was a paper version or a spreadsheet, and then we automated it into an InfoPath form with a workflow attached to it. So the form had to be manually filled out either on screen or if you're an engineer was off site, sort of with the good old fashioned pen and paper. It would then need authorising by the manager, so it would rely on the person seeing their manager and being able to pass it to them. And then this would be walked down to accounts where it was left in an open tray, maybe not the most secure place. Okay, so we're going to look at how, through the session, how we automate this and make it an electronic form using InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. So InfoPath is going to be, it is the final version of InfoPath, but it is going to be supported until 2023. So it's still going to be around for a while, and SharePoint Designer along with that. So InfoPath is the software that is used for designing forms. SharePoint is the distribution side of things, so you can host the host the form via SharePoint or email. People can have the ability to just fill out the form, so not everybody has to have InfoPath. There is an InfoPath, what we call filler, which allow people to fill in forms without having the full software, and also create web forms. Access, Excel and Visual Studio also have the capability of building these forms as well, if you have any experience with those. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at things that you can do on a form. The first thing we're going to have a look at is an input. These are things, if you've seen Excel forms or Word forms or generally filled forms in on the internet, you'll see the different types of things. So you might have text boxes that people can fill in, or drop-down lists. It's always better to have a drop-down list if you can give them a choice. Those of you that work with forms, I'm sure you get lots of data input error from the users where they like to call things different names, or indeed just put their own variation in. So if you can control the data with a drop-down list, it saves on error and sort of checking. Then we've got things like checkboxes where people can tick options, a date picker where people can enter the date and time, a selection list box where people can choose more than one option, and just some general formatting options with a bulleted and numbered list. Also things like a group or person people picker. This can connect to AD and people can fill in names from the organisation just by doing a simple lookup like you would do in sending an email. So these are inputs that you can build onto the form, and a lot of planning is sort of needed to think what you want on the form before you actually sort of hit the screen and start building it yourself. But these are the considerations you can think about what you want on there. We've also got things called objects, which can include command buttons, calculated values. You'll see on the expense form a little later on that if we want to work out someone's mileage or someone's expenses, we can put calculated fields in that do the calculations for us rather than relying on formulas in Excel or so be it calculators. We can include pictures in there and hyperlinks and also attachments. Containers then is another terminology within InfoPath that hold the actual form together. So in a section, you can have the different inputs contained within one section on the form. So it's just a way of grouping them together. A repeating section is something where you will have more than one entry. So on the expense form, if they want to enter more than one line, they can just keep adding the lines. You don't have to have a huge long form in anticipation of everybody's entries. Okay, so they're the three things that we can use on InfoPath, and we can look at how those are built onto the form. So here's an example of how the form started out. We looked at our current paper process and we transposed that onto an electronic form built in InfoPath. So you can see we've got the date starting the section, which is actually a repeating table. That means that your form can look like this when you release it, but people can put either, you know, from 2 to 20 entries, and it doesn't, it expands with however many entries they've got. So we can ask for text as to where they went and what they did, and then the mileage field may be a numeric column. So if you're used to Excel, you're used to formatting things as numbers. That's pretty much the same in InfoPath. You can format as a number or as a currency amount for any hotel expenses or meals. And then the others are just the relevant fields that we needed to capture as per the current paper process. So that section can repeat depending on how many entries they've got. And then, oops, sorry, just a little keen on the mouse button there. We then have some calculated fields up at the top that will show the totals, the running totals of their mileage and hotels and meal expenses, and 2 calculated fields that works out the mileage if they are under 833 miles and if they are unlucky enough to have to drive more than 833 miles in a month, they get the lower rate, and it can calculate that as well. So there's some calculated fields on there, but you can pretty much see what they contain. Okay, so just to explain some of the types of things that you can do within InfoPath, we've got formatting, which is very similar to Excel. So we can format as a number, we can format as currency or percentages. So any calculations that you can think of that would sit on your InfoPath forms, if you can do it in Excel or on a calculator, you can pretty much do it in InfoPath. The types of data we can have are dates, text, time, and hyperlinks. And then we have things very similar to sort of Excel or any sort of logical process where we can put rules against things. So we can determine things to be only read only. We can say please don't leave things blank, so we can make them mandatory, which is pretty essential when you're filling in forms. You don't want people to miss data out. Conditional actions that looks at what's been put in on the form and then performs an action depending on what they've filled in. And conditional formatting will colour depending what they filled in. So if they go over a certain value and you want it to go red or green, then you can apply that. And that's something similar to Excel. So if you've used that in Excel, it's similar in InfoPath. And also data validation, another Excel feature that transposes through to InfoPath, where you can stipulate things. So you might say, the quantity has to be greater than 10, or the date has to be greater than the 1st of the month. So you can stipulate rules on your form to enforce accurate data entry. Okay, InfoPath can also receive external data from 3 services, web services, the most common being SharePoint, and other external databases or XML files. Okay, so far we have come up with a basic form in InfoPath. We've got the structure, we've got the calculated fields in there and what we want it to do. We're going to add a couple more features in onto this form. So we can format you're seeing a sequence of fields now being filled in here. These are formatted as currency, which just makes it look a bit nicer and also makes sense to the user that it is money that they're putting in. And also we can format the hotels, meals and other column to show currency as well. We can also colour the form, so with our traditional blue, make it look a bit more appealing than just the blank white. We can also add in a people picker, which you were familiar, probably seeing in Outlook, things like that, where people can pick their names or their manager's names from a box and there's no room for spelling mistakes or errors. So that can be linked to your SharePoint groups within your system. Okay, so just to run through some things on InfoPath that you can do to make your form look a bit more appealing and to brand it. So the traditional sort of format text, we can colour text, make it different sizes, obviously different fonts, so you've got the full capability of making it branded to match your company scheme. We can insert tables to group fields together and also images. And if you've got in-house styles or company fonts, then those can be applied as well. So the consistent look and feel that you get either through SharePoint or just a form itself. Page layout templates, we've got a choice when we build a form, how we want the page to be laid out with our fields and our labels. So we've got a choice there. And it's fairly intuitive for end users to be able to see these. They're very similar to Word or PowerPoint. And you can also build in your themes. So if you use themes in PowerPoint to enforce your company colours and branding, you can do the same on InfoPath. So if we add some branding to our form, so we go from a sort of plain white form to a form that looks a bit more dynamic with some colours. We've applied the company logo and the company name up at the top. And just highlighted the sort of working area with the turquoise colour. We've also done shading on a couple of fields just to make them stand out. And you can see here we've got some bold formatting as well on the current figures, which are tallied as people enter those into the form. So you can make it look quite dynamic, a bit more appealing than just a blank sort of white piece of paper. You can make your company colours and your logo sort of stand out. Once you've done the form, you may find that different departments need to see different parts of the form, and they're probably sometimes not interested in some parts of it. So in SharePoint, generally, there are things called views, which allow you to say, show this data, but in different ways to different people. You can do this with InfoPath views as well. So these can be done either through a button that someone clicks on to see a different view, a drop-down button, or a workflow can actually enforce that view to change. So here's a few examples of the views. We've got an admin view where the person processing the form probably needs to see everything. A print view where if someone prints it off, you might want it to look different or be set up at least to print out on an A4 sheet. So you can customize the layout for a printing view. and the third one as a read-only view where they can view it but they can't actually edit the form. So this is something to consider when you're setting the form up. Who are your audience? What do they need to do with it? And what do they need to see? So this is our current form. And then in an admin view, you can see here that the calculated fields at the top have disappeared. We've got the name of the view in the top left-hand corner, and it's pretty much a summary of that form. Okay, so when it comes to SharePoint, we can display the form in a SharePoint library. This is less used, it's not as desirable. It provides a one-off form. It's not reusable, and it just encapsulates a specific need at that time. It's not sort of reusable, so it's doesn't tend to be the option people go for. The SharePoint content type is probably the most desirable one. We can put a form in as what we call a content type, which is something, it's like a master form in the background of SharePoint, and that can be used across multiple sites. It's one form so that you can guarantee everybody's using the same version. You can update it from one place and it will filtrate down to the other sites below. So if you have a change, you don't then have to go through and find 50 different versions of the form. And you can have different types of the form in one library, so it's all held in one single location. The full sort of version of this would be if you were working with .NET, so that wouldn't really encapsulate most end users, and that's an admin approved form. So the most desirable is the SharePoint content type, which we are going to be demonstrating later on. So here's an example of that content type. Hopefully most of you have seen SharePoint, but if you haven't, this is a SharePoint library. And when they go into that library, normally document libraries are associated with Word and Excel, but you can, basically what we've done here in the top left-hand corner is included the expenses form within the library, so they don't get an option to do anything else but fill that form in. Once the form is filled in, it will show an entry in the library, and again this library can be visible by people that you allow through permissions, so it doesn't have to be an open area. You can restrict it with permissions within SharePoint. So to recap, we've taken a paper-based form which required filling in either with pen and paper or on a spreadsheet, that then got emailed or passed around physically, then was taken to a department that was open to lots of different errors or things to go wrong, to now where we've got an electronic form within InfoPath, which we can control with permissions in SharePoint, and we can grant permission to the form only to the people that we want to see it. Okay, so that's a summary of where we are with the form at the moment. At the end of the session, I will be going to give you a bit of an overview of just show you InfoPath and the form actually working. So we're going to move on to workflows in a second. Okay, so this slide is about manual processes versus electronic workflows within SharePoint. So we might have a person that fills in our form. We've got our very astute looking person in the middle there, and he may fill in his form in Excel and then print it off. The little feet, yeah, we all walk around the office in bare feet, don't we? The footprint indicates us walking to accounts or walking the form to our manager to be signed. Then it gets sent off, walking it to our manager to sign. The guy with the clipboard is the manager actually, and he can reject or approve the form. So the big red cross says no, you've not quite filled out your expenses properly, or the form, and that gets put in the bin or goes back to Excel, and the process repeats itself until he approves it. Once the manager approves and goes to the green tick stage, then that can get sent off to HR or your correct business department to complete the process. So a lot of backwards and forwards in. If the manager's not in, then the decision of the approval, it can be delayed. So it relies a lot on people coming into contact with each other. Whereas over on the right-hand side here, we have a workflow which we can map out sort of on paper before we enter it into SharePoint. So we can start the workflow off. We can submit the expenses form. So when the person clicks the submit button, that's the trigger for the workflow to start in the background. It will then go off to the manager for approval, and that's electronically. So it lands in his inbox via email. So even if he's not on site today that day to sign the form, he can pick it up from his emails at his earliest convenience. Again, the decision can be to approve or reject, or to actually say to make a change. So there are 3 decisions the manager can make electronically. It's a very simple task that they have to do. It appears in their Outlook, and they get some simple buttons to click on to say reject, approve, or make change. If it's rejected, that will then notify the person that filled in the expense form that it's been rejected. So that's another email. So that doesn't depend on them seeing each other. It notifies them electronically. If all is good and the form is okay, then one of the actions you could do is set the form as read-only, so that once it's done, it can't be changed. So you can't go back in and add a few noughts on the end of anything. And then it can go over to HR electronically as well. They'll receive an email and access that process via SharePoint, and they can approve the changes and actually process the form from SharePoint as well. So all of that is electronic. It doesn't rely on people physically taking the forms anywhere. It can't get lost. You can see exactly where it is at any one time by looking at the workflow on SharePoint. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at how that workflow takes place and how the logic applies to it. So again, just a recap of the manual process, which I'm sure you're all familiar with now, and then the workflow itself. You can build in, and you can build in what we call decisions or rules or tasks through SharePoint. So we can tell it to do certain actions and certain tasks at certain stages of the form. So you can design this around each step, so it's completely customizable. Okay, so that's our electronic process that we would go through. So just to summarise, workflows are an automated movement of electronic documents through a sequence of actions or tasks which you can develop in SharePoint Designer that are related to a business process. So it all stems from what business process have we got that's manual that we need to drive through to an electronic version. So SharePoint Designer is the thing that deploys the workflow. You don't need any code for it. You can just do it by logic through SharePoint Designer. It's fairly user-friendly with descriptions that suit the actions of what the user will do. These can be applied on a list, so it can be used within SharePoint. If you're not familiar with lists are basically a container to hold data. They're not documents, a bit like having a spreadsheet but on the internet, so you can have a list that contains data. You can't really reuse these workflows on that list, so we tend to use a reusable workflow on a content type. Not to get too deep really, but a content type is a capture of data within SharePoint that sort of sits in the background, and you can deploy this to many libraries or many sites. So if it's applicable across sort of your whole SharePoint site, you can use it in different places. We can apply workflows on a site, which means that it's just triggered not within a specific library, and these are quite generic. As you can imagine, a form in a library is very specific, where a site workflow might be something that's just very generic and you can't really hone it down to an instance. So they're the three types of workflows that you can have within SharePoint. So as I said, you don't really need any coding experience. So if you're not a developer, you can still build these things through SharePoint Designer. There's three things that you can use to complete your workflow. One is a condition. So you might say if a person does this, or if a box is filled in a certain way, do an action and then carry out these steps. So it's really critical for you to get your process sort of nailed down as to what you want to do before you get to this stage, so that you can say, right, when this person fills in a form, these are the things I want to happen. So as an example, we've got it going to the manager to be filled out and then going to HR. So the conditions that you can use are wait for a field to equal something. So you could have it when something goes to yes, or when something is submitted, or if it's created on a specific date or by a specific person. Or you can add in a specific file type as well. So these are some of the conditions you can use to say, when this happens, do an action. So our action, oops, sorry, using my wheel, not my click. The actions can be core actions within InfoPath. A document set action is something that's quite specific to SharePoint. If you're not familiar with it, it's a group of documents that you can add an action on, or you can have list actions, task, or utility actions. So there's lots of different actions you can do within SharePoint Designer, and obviously once you start using the application, you can investigate those a bit further. So we're back to our form. And people will fill this in as they go through the month, and then the submit button will actually trigger the workflow to happen. So they can keep that form in that library and keep updating it, and then once they finish the entry, they can submit it. So submit would be the condition that actually triggers the actions and the steps in the workflows. So this is what the workflow screen looks like within SharePoint Designer. Each workflow that you do will have its own sort of separate screen and tab within Designer itself. Oh, sorry. I can use a mouse, honestly. So you have a couple of start options, and this is when you can tell SharePoint Designer when to apply the workflow. So you might say start the workflow automatically when an item is created, or start the workflow when an item is changed. If someone makes a change to a form, you don't then want them to have to go through the process manually. You want the electronic workflow to start again if they've changed the document. So that's your choices for when it starts. So that's the electronic or the SharePoint Designer workflow that we can build. We can say when they click on the submit button, wait for it to go. So in the background, the submit button will have a condition that is yes or no. So it's quite a logical statement there. There's no code involved. So it just says wait for allow submit, which is the submit button, to be equal to yes. So what that really means is when the person clicks submit. Then go off and do an approval process, which you can have built into SharePoint. So start an approval process on the current item, which is the expense form, and use the manager workflow to tell it to go to the manager. Then it's going to set the expenses view to read only, so they can't alter the form and go back and amend it. and then send it off to HR to actually action the expenses form with the current workflow of a HR admin, which has previously been set up as well. So these are all permissions based, so not everybody can do this, obviously. It's the only the designated people in the correct business process. Then the workflow finishes and the expenses is submitted, and all of that is tracked on the workflow. So that's your audit trail. You can see at any point where it is, whether it's just gone to the manager or when it's gone to HR. And you can see this from your SharePoint library. Okay, so now I'm going to demo what all of that looks like. So if you just bear with me a second, I just need to rearrange some screens. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a SharePoint library called Expenses. The name of it in the top left-hand corner. You can see there's some previously submitted expenses in there. The nature of the library itself, these columns that you have here, the name, submit expenses and expenses view, these are all customizable, so you can have whichever columns you want in there. And if you have what we call metadata, which is business data attached to that form, you can have that displaying as well. So it really can be whatever solution you want to achieve. Within the form, within the library, we've got a new document button, and when I click on that, hopefully that should load up the form. So this is our expenses form that we designed in InfoPath, but it's now being hosted by a SharePoint library. You can see here, so I'm just going to go through and fill this in as a dummy entry. So I've got a drop-down list here from which I can choose the month. Enter the car reg. And a people picker for the employee. So I can go into the address book if I want to and find my name from there. Or I can just type it in and use the check names feature to verify that I exist. Hopefully I still do. Up at the top, we've got some summary information. So this isn't designed for the users to fill in. This is the summary as people fill it in. Over here, I've got the submit button when I'm ready to finish my entries. So I come down to what we call the repeating table. So you can see here, instead of saying, well, someone might want to submit 200 lines, I don't have to allow for those 200. I can just put one line in, and then they can choose to repeat the entry as many times as they want. So it's quite a condensed form on screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the details. Using the calendar picker here, I can choose the date, enter a job reference, and obviously these fields can be whatever you choose to make them. Description of what has taken place. Mileage will be formatted as a numeric field, and hotels as a currency field. And then there's room for any other details as well. So I can fill in any of these boxes as I wish. You can see the expenses total is currently at £100 because I've put my hotels in. If I put my meals in, then that will update automatically. And if we have a look up at the top, the summary area has already told us how much we spent on our hotels and meals as a breakdown, and the mileage has been calculated and shows a total over on the right hand side. So I can put some overtime hours in, choose a rate, and that then shows total overtime in the top right hand corner. So these are the calculated fields we mentioned earlier, and this shows the calculations as we go on. It's not calculated at the HR end, it's already done for them by the time they come to get the form. If I wanted to create another line, just to show you how the repeating section works, I can just click Insert Item, and I can keep inserting that data. Okay, so I could save that. So let's save that and give it a name. Notice I haven't submitted it yet because I may want to go back and keep adding to that form. So I can close the form down if I wish to. That form will now appear in my expenses library, which again can be controlled by permission, so only the relevant people can see this area. It tells me it's in progress because I've not actually submitted it yet, and I can go back if I want to and add more to that form. Once I've decided I've finished my entries and I want to submit the form, the submit button, remember, is the key trigger for the workflow. So once I click submit, the workflow will actually start. So I can click submit. That then, as part of the workflow, changes to read only, so I can't change this anymore now. So now I can close the form down. So once I've submitted the form, we get the in progress for the workflow. I can click on the workflow and see what's going on behind here. So I'm just going to click the in progress. As part of the workflow, you do set up what happens when that button is pressed. So you can see here it's still waiting for it to recognise that I've pressed submit, but it will build that history up and show where it's gone, who it's with at the moment. So if it's waiting on the manager, you can see who it's with. So you can just simply click on the workflow and have a look. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to switch to my inbox now. So here the approval has come through. So a HR expense item has been assigned to me. So obviously I wouldn't approve my own expenses, otherwise I'd be quite rich. But this would be the manager's side of things now. So the workflow was initiated. If you remember back on those slides, as an employee, I fill my form in, and then instead of me printing it off and giving it to my manager, it actually delivers it via email. So this is what your approver will see. It tells me, and you can customize this text so you can make it as friendly as you want to. Up at the top, I've got open this task, but I need to review the expenses first here. So I can click on the link. I don't even have to know where it's stored or even what a SharePoint library is. I can just click on the link. And I can have a look at the person's expenses and see the details, and then I can be happy to approve it, or I may want to reject it. So I don't even have to flick back to my email to approve or reject this, because I do have a link up at the top that says open this task. So your manager then has to click open the task. Okay, and then you get the option to complete the task. Actually, that's not the right button. Okay, let me just save that and come out of that. Just switch back to email. Okay, so this form can be customized, and you can have reject or approve as well. But we'll just click on complete for today. But you can have your reject and approve buttons in there as well, which then feeds back to the person if they've rejected. Let's just complete that. So from an approval manager's point of view, it's quite simple. They get an email with a link. They can click on that link and have a look at the form, and then to approve it, they can complete the task from their inbox. The person that's in control of the workflow gets notified that this has come through. So you can see I had one earlier, so I had one start, I had one to say actually complete it, and then an email to say that the workflow had been completed. So you can customize this email, you can customize the text here as well, so that your experience is as rich as possible for your managers. Let me just see if I can. Okay, ignore that. Never go offbeat in a presentation. Go away. Go away. Okay, so once the workflow has been approved, the status will change to approved. And I can click on the workflow. And in here, I can see exactly the full history of what's happened. So I can see that the form was submitted, the workflow was started, the task then was created for the manager to approve that entry. So this is the area where it shows the task being created. Once that approval has been complete, shows you at what time and date it was completed. So you've got full audit trail here of what's gone on, and then the fact that it's been approved. So this is a lot more reliable than, you know, asking someone what they did with your piece of paper and did they submit it on time and did they do it correctly. So we've got full audit trail and info here if you need to from that library. Okay, so these entries will be stored in here. Now you can keep these in the library, and you can implement the different views. I don't think we've got any on here, but you can provide the different views for the different people so they can see different versions of that form. Just to show you briefly what InfoPath looks like, if I can get into it, just bear with me a second. Okay, just bear with me a minute, folks. Never worked with children, IT, or animals. Okay, thanks for bearing with me there, folks. I'm just trying to get the form so I can show it you. Okay, so this is just an overview of what it looks like in InfoPath, in case you haven't seen InfoPath. We have a list of the different fields down the right-hand side here. If you've worked with access forms or something similar, pretty much the same. So each area on the form is basically a building block. So we've got the label of a field and then the actual content of the field. So we can have drop-down arrows, people pickers, and then our numerical fields and columns here. So you can basically pick up these boxes, move things around, and display it how you want it to. So you can choose from your different layouts how you want it to look and build your form to your requirements. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a brief look of what that looks like in InfoPath in case you haven't seen it. Okay, so let me just switch back to my presentation. Okay, so we've gone from a paper-based form that's manually moved around the office, excuse me, and relies on people being at their desk to sign things off on the piece of paper. Then things get transported to HR, and we hope that the things don't get lost in the middle. To transfer over to an electronic form with an automated workflow that takes care of the process once the person has submitted the form, including sending to the manager for approval and HR to finish the process and complete the form. So today we've been it's been built on SharePoint 2010, the workflow. SharePoint 2013, just to mention, there are a few more things extra with 13. You still don't need any code, but there are some new actions. So if you've got 2010 and you're thinking about upgrading, these are some of the new features. You can still use 2010 in SharePoint 2013. But there is a new workflow section which involves stages, loops, and app steps, which for someone like me who isn't technical may not seem very descriptive, but it's basically things that can happen behind the scenes. There's new functionality. So Office 365, it comes standard with, but it does require SharePoint Server 2013, separate SQL Server, and Workflow Manager. So there's a bit more required for the 2013 version. Okay, so what's next? As Chris was saying, we do provide consultancy. We do run courses on workflow, InfoPath, and SharePoint itself. The majority of those I deliver as well. So we do a lot of end user courses, and then there's the technical courses as well. And if you need any more information about that, then obviously you can contact Chris. Other than that, I'll hand back over to Chris.
Fantastic. Just a question from. Obviously, everybody can feel free to ask questions now, should you wish to do so. John's asked a question on the screen. How would that work if the person opened it on a mobile device? I think this goes back to when a form's been submitted to somebody. Can they, when they're out and about, would they be able to accept, reject that form? I presume you can open it in the browser to be able to do it.
Yeah, if it's browser based and they've got Outlook, then yes. They can actually approve it via the browser as well. So as long as they've got capacity to open it via a browser, then yes, they could do it via a mobile device like a tablet or an iPad or something.
So from my understanding, I think that includes obviously Windows Phone, Android, and iPhone. So obviously being the main three. You do have the ability to access the forms via a mobile device should you wish to do so. Hopefully that answers your question, John. If anybody else has got any questions, again, please do feel free to type them in the chat, and we will answer. Obviously if we don't know the answer, we will indeed come back to you. So please go ahead.